Hello.
Hey Jennifer, you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me good?
Yep.
Okay.
It was funny. I had to actually enter the code for the meeting this time.
Really?
Yeah, it like took me there and asked me, and I just typed in the webinar ID, so it should be fine. But that's the first time it made me do that.
Yeah, they're always changing Zoom. My link
Uh,
is like a recurring link, so I never even go in Zoom until we have these meetings. But I think they update things, and I have got a couple emails about security, and so
okay, I'm gonna use the restroom before this meeting. I'll be right back.
Jesse's bringing one of our new engineers. His name is Luke.
Yeah, Luke. Yep, yep.
So they
He's
should
the new alternate on the list. I have a note to make sure we introduce him.
yeah.
Yeah. All right, I'll be back.
Okay.
All right, we're ready to go. With the time being 1:30 on the dot, October, we'll open the, call the October 9th, 2024 STRGBA GSA meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. We have a quorum, so we're here from the city of Oakdale. We've got Ian Sather. City of Modesto, we've got Timothy Barahona. We've got City of Riverbank, Darren Smallin. City of Waterford, Mike Pitcock. Oakdale Irrigation District, myself, Eric Thorburn. Modesto Irrigation District, got Jesse Franco, and Stanislaus County, Christina Kinnick. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Item number 2, business from the public. At this time, interested persons are welcome to introduce any topic within the agency's jurisdiction. Matters presented under this heading may be discussed, but no action will be taken by the agency at this meeting. It's not required, but speakers may provide their name and address. Public comments will be limited to 5 minutes per speaker. Anybody from the public? All right, got a hand up on the phone. Allie, go ahead.
Hi, I was just wondering if there were any updates on the work group.
I was planning, yeah, at the end, I've got a committee update, so we'll
Okay.
touch on that at the end of the meeting.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep. Anybody else? Seeing none, hearing none, we'll move right along. Item number 3, this is the August 14th, 2024 meeting minutes. So everybody has had a chance, has had a chance to review those minutes, so I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve last meeting minutes.
Motion approved by Jesse. Second. Thank you, Mike. Before proceeding to vote, I will take any comments from the public. Open it up to the public. Public comments on the August 14th minutes. Seeing none, hearing none, we will proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 4, approve the 2025 STRGBA GSA budget. So this is attached. The current draft is in the packet. I also passed out, just to make things a little clearer, some red lines that Tim and I talked about after the last meeting. So this was presented on originally at the last meeting in August. There's been a slight change. So according to the exhibit in our cost share agreement, the annual report, which is the third line item down, instead of being 190, it was actually 191,305. So I just increased that to 191,305, which increased the total to 812,805, and then the breakdown below reflects that as well. It's only $160 and change per agency, so it's very, very small change. But when you're breaking it down between 2 invoices, one between the city of Modesto and then MID, and then also amongst all 7 agencies, including the county, for the GSA or annual report aspect of it, the decimals ends up going to the decimal place. So there's no way to really round it off real easily there. So I want to bring this back. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to review with their boards, councils as necessary.
First it was the 22nd to.
Yeah.
This budget has to go to our council.
You doesn't need to, you just need feedback.
Budget.
So what I do for, yeah, exactly. So we incorporate it in our budget, and then we take it to our board and get their feedback on the number and everything, and make sure that they don't have any
I didn't
questions.
know if there was some sort of.
You don't need-
no.
no.
An MOU for my D not phone number.
Yeah,
This wasn't on my radar. So
Right.
Yeah, it's in our budget, so we can go ahead and pay it.
Yep.
Know,
we don't need a resolution or anything from every agency. It's just an opportunity to take back to your boards and councils. Just action at this committee or this agency is all we need.
Yeah. Hopefully later this year, we'll see that. taking this to our council just because we do need a budget for this moving forward now that we're rocking and rolling a lot of these projects, and make sure that we can moving forward make these payments. And the payments were smaller before, so it's budgeted, so that'll be the only thing we. That's just our internal process.
Good. I'll entertain a motion if. Motion to approve? Okay. All right, thank you. Second from Ian. Open it up for public comment on the 2025 STRGBA GSA budget. Nobody. Quiet today so far. All right, well, first. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. Motion carries. All right. Item number 5, STRGBA GSA comment letter to the notice of preparation of a PEIR for Salida, their Salida Community Plan Amendment area. And actually, Emily was going to help us out with a general overview. But button on that mic if you don't mind. Introduce yourself first, just in case somebody in the room doesn't know who you are.
Emily Sheldon, I'm an associate engineer here at Lady.
Thanks.
So what we wanted to provide the GSA with was our proposed response to a notice of preparation that we received from Santa Claus County. They sent this over to us last month, and I believe they sent it to OIB as the GSA chair, not just to OIB directly. So at any rate, they are preparing, this was a notice of preparation for a PEIR, environmental impact report, that will be done for the Salida community amendments to the Salida community plan. So the Salida plan was actually approved back in 2007, over 3,300 acres. But at this point, the county will be having this PEIR done to perform a planning level analysis of like the land uses that were outlined in that plan. There's no new developments happening currently or proposed yet. It's just an overall programmatic EIR. However, we feel like the GSA, this would be a good opportunity to put the county and just keep it on the radar for the planning process as far as water supply and demand of that amendment area in Salida. And this is our opportunity to make sure and request that to be detailed analysis in the EIR itself. And so our proposed letter was provided in the packet as well. And so we do request that a detailed analysis of the proposed water supplies and the impact to groundwater and recharge be included for the specific area, including water budgets of pre and post development. And so this is due. They are requesting that any comments on this notice of preparation be turned in by Friday. This is the first chance we've had to bring it to the GSA. We did bring it forward to the TAC planning group, but at any rate, this is before everyone now. If there's any comments on that.
Yeah, certainly helped us draft a letter. A lot of what is in the letter is similar to what we state in our when we comment on new well applications. Let them know we're the agency that has jurisdiction over the groundwater in the basin, and then like Emily said, asking for water budgets to make sure they're planning appropriately for any kind of new demand or changing demand from surface water to groundwater, and taking into account the fact that we're currently in an average annual overdraft condition. So
right, and we did note as well that management actions will be in the works here in the near future. So that's something I feel like we might see happen more often with cities and county developments, is trying to keep that on their radar as well for planning purposes.
That's how the county was hoping the GSA's response to the steps of planning referrals and whatnot. So it was like we're on board I think it's really good that you guys included impacts associated with the project in valuable reach materials. Good job.
Any other questions, comments from the member agencies here? Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion.
All right. Listen, thank you. 1 second.
A second.
Any public comment on the letter as it's drafted?
I haven't actually read the letter, but I have seen one before, so I'm pretty comfortable with what's in it. I think this is a good first step. I know some of us commented on the city of Riverbed, their expansion, something kind of similar. When we did that, I sent a copy of it to the city of Oakdale, to Brian. And one of the things that I think this group and all of us in general have to do now is start changing the way of thinking, that we can no longer just plan a major development without thinking about how we're going to impact the groundwater basin and how you're going to mitigate that impact. So I think being consistent, getting the word out, we have a century's worth of thought process that we've got to change on how that thought process works. So I think this is a good step. Thanks.
That was Scott Moody, by the way. General manager of OID made that comment. Thanks, Scott. Any other public comment? We'll proceed to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Right, item number 6. So we're gonna have Liz help us out from Todd Groundwater on the spring 2024 groundwater level analysis. Presenting that, and we are only weeks away from doing our fall monitoring.
Hi, Eric. Can you see me and hear me clearly?
Yes, and we can see the presentation.
Great, great, great. Thank you. All right. Well, thanks everyone for having me. My name is Liz Elliott with Todd Groundwater. And today I'm going to be talking about the groundwater levels that were measured this spring as part of the GSP monitoring event. So the agenda, I'm going to start out by summarizing the spring 2024 GSP monitoring event, and then I'm going to go through some draft results. These draft results are going to be in, they're not called final because they're not yet in the annual report. So these will be part of the next annual report that we're working on for water year 2024, and that's due to DWR April 1st, 2025. So the water level analysis that I'm going to talk about today will include the sustainable management criteria analysis, and I'll also show you some hydrographs so you can see what's happening with the groundwater levels in the subbasin, and then I'll end with a summary and give you some context for where we're at. As a reminder, this is the definition of undesirable results that was developed in the GSP. For chronic lowering of groundwater levels, an undesirable result will occur when at least 33% of the representative monitoring wells exceed the MT for a principal aquifer in 3 consecutive fall monitoring events. For interconnected surface water, an undesirable result will occur on one of the rivers when between 33% and 50% of the representative monitoring wells for that river exceed the MT in 3 consecutive fall monitoring events. And it's 33% on both the Stanislaus and Tuolumne rivers and 50% on the San Joaquin River. And the important thing to keep in mind here is that the definition of undesirable results, as you can see, is based on the fall monitoring events. So these draft results that I'm showing you from the spring don't count towards that. So the spring 2024 GSP monitoring event. GSP monitoring events are done twice a year in spring and fall. And so this is the 5th GSP monitoring event that's been conducted since the GSP was submitted in January of 2022. The objective of this event and all of the spring events is to capture the seasonal high groundwater elevation before irrigation season begins. During this event, which took place in late February and early March, groundwater elevations were measured in 59 representative monitoring wells. 2 representative monitoring wells were not measured because of casing obstructions, and these were Wood and Quisenberry. The groundwater elevations that were measured during this event were reported to DWR before July 1st, 2024, which is the deadline for the spring event to be reported. And this is a summary of the minimum threshold exceedances in water year 2024. So I'm showing you both the fall 2023 and spring 2024 results on this slide, and it's divided by principal aquifer: Western Upper, Western Lower, and Eastern principal aquifer. And as you can see, the target for undesirable results is 33%. So if we're less than 33% MT exceedances, we're below that target towards undesirable result. And I'm sure, and that is why you're seeing the percentages here all highlighted green, because we're below that target in all 3 aquifers during both events, fall and spring. In the Western Upper principal aquifer, we didn't have any MT exceedances in either the fall or the spring. So we're at 0% below the MT in both events. In the Western Lower principal aquifer in the fall, 1 well was below the MT, and in the spring, they were all above the MT. So we've got 20% below the MT in the fall and 0% below the MT in spring. In the Eastern principal aquifer, in the fall, 11 wells were below the MT, and in the spring, 7 were below the MT. And these also were below that 33% target. So 30% were below in the fall and 19% were below in the spring. And again, the spring percentages don't count towards undesirable results, but are just there to show you sort of how we're doing in comparison. The next slide is similar, but for interconnected surface water. So this shows both the fall and spring events along each of the rivers, the San Joaquin, Stanislaus, and Tuolumne. Along the San Joaquin, in both the fall and the spring, both wells were above the MT during both events, so 0% are below the MT. Along the Stanislaus, in the fall, 2 wells were below the MT, and in the spring, just 1. And so we're at 25% in the fall below the MT and 13% below the MT in spring. And along the Tuolumne River, 1 well was below the MT in the fall, and all were above the MT in the spring. So 11% were below the MT in the fall, and 0% were below the MT in the spring. We also have interim milestones, as you probably know. And in the spring 2024 event, no wells exceeded their IMs. As just a reminder, the IMs were defined for the representative monitoring wells in the Oakdale Irrigation District management area and also the non-district east management area. And there are 14 wells with IMs in the chronic lowering of water levels monitoring network and 5 with IMs in the interconnected surface water. But again, in the spring, water levels were above the IMs in all of the wells that had IMs. So that's good news. And so this is a map that shows the MT exceedances in the Western Upper Principal Aquifer from the spring 2024 event. And so the green dots are wells whose water levels were above the MT. So in spring 2024, all of the wells had water levels that were above the MT in the Western Upper Principal Aquifer. In fact, most wells in the Western Upper Principal Aquifer had water levels that were at or above the measurable objectives, which was excellent to see. And in comparison to a year earlier, spring 2023, it was similar. In spring 2023, also, there were no wells that were below the MT. So I'm going to show you a couple of hydrographs from the Western Upper Principal Aquifer. This is the Caton 69 well, which is in the western part of the aquifer near the San Joaquin River. And you can see that since fall 2022, groundwater levels have risen And the most recent water level is the spring 2024 level, the last dot on the hydrograph. And this level is above the measurable objective. Moving slightly to the east, this is the Machado 23 well, also in the western upper Principal Aquifer. The spring 2024 level is above the measurable objective. And similar to the previous well, you can see water levels have risen since fall 2022. So this increase since fall 2022 is happening throughout the western upper Principal Aquifer, which is really good to see. Moving to the western lower Principal Aquifer, we only have 5 wells in the monitoring network. And in the spring 2024, there were no wells below the MT. And this is similar to a year earlier in the spring 2023, also no wells below the MT. So that's why all of these wells are shown as sort of with the green halo. Showing you a couple hydrographs. This is a monitoring well in the city of Modesto that was constructed and first measured in 2020. And so since 2020, the groundwater level that was measured in most recently in the spring 2024 is actually the highest measured level since it was constructed, since it was first measured. And there are 2 other monitoring wells that were constructed at about the same time within the city of Modesto along the edge of the Corcoran that exhibit similar patterns, where the spring 2024 level is at its highest measured level since it was constructed about 4 years ago. And then moving down to MW2D, this is a well that was a monitoring well that was installed with Prop 68 funding a couple of years ago along the Tuolumne River. The spring 2024 groundwater level is above the minimum threshold and a few feet above the spring 2023 measurement. So you can see this hydrograph shows levels that have been bouncing above and below the MT since it was constructed. And we are above the MT, very close to the measurable objective in the spring 2024. Now moving on to the eastern Principal Aquifer. During the spring 2024 event, 19% of the wells were below the MT. So this means 30 wells, which are the green dots, are above the MT, and 7 wells are below the MT, and those are shown as the red dots. 2 wells were not monitored, and they're shown as the gray dots. That's Quisenberry and Wood. But you can see, just sort of looking at this map, the red dots are clustered in the east, in the very east of the aquifer, except for one which is kind of close to the Tuolumne River. But so most of the MT exceedances are occurring in the eastern subbasin, in the non-district east, and also the eastern edge of the OID management area. 14 wells have IMs, and all of them were above. 1 was not measured. And in comparison to a year earlier, in spring 2023, we had 12 wells that were below the MT. So it's an improvement of 5 wells. 5 wells that were below the MT in the spring that are no longer below the MT this spring of 24. Moving on to a few hydrographs from the eastern Principal Aquifer. This well, Bangs Ave 243, is in the westernmost part of this aquifer. The spring 2024 groundwater level is above the minimum threshold for the first time since the spring of 2022. So we've seen this rise since spring 2022. Moving slightly to the east, this is Bentley OID 2. The spring 2024 groundwater level is above the MT for the first time since the spring of 2021, which is also nice to see. So we had a recovery of a few feet since the fall event in this well. And then moving further east to the Paulsell 1 OID 11 well. This well, as you can see, has had declining water levels since the mid to late 2000s. There is a slight increase in groundwater elevation from the fall 23 event by a few feet. And this interrupts the kind of steady decline that this well has had since spring 2022. So we're moving in the right direction. But we do see this pattern in the past, before 2022, where there was a slight increase between fall and spring. So this is not inconsistent with what we've seen in the past. It's just over the last few years, we haven't seen this pattern. And on to interconnected surface water. So there was only one well in the interconnected surface water monitoring network that had water levels below the MT in the spring. Along the San Joaquin, both of the wells were below the MT. And that's similar to what happened a year earlier in the spring of 2023. Along the Stanislaus River, one of the wells, this is the only well that is below the MT, the Marquis OID 10 well. So 1 of 7 are below the MT at 13%. And this is an improvement from a year earlier in the spring of 23 when 25% were below the MT. And then along the Tuolumne River, all of the wells were above the MT. So there were none below. And this is also an improvement from a year earlier in the spring of 23 when 22% were below the MT. So we've seen some improvement since the spring of 23. And here are hydrographs, one along each of the rivers. This is Caton 69. We see in the spring of 2024, the groundwater level is above the measurable objective. And you can see that groundwater levels are increasing and have been increasing since the fall of 2022. This is consistent with what we've seen in the Western Upper Principal Aquifer, like I showed you earlier. And along the Stanislaus River, this is Marquis OID 10. This is the only well whose spring 24 water level was below the MT. And as you can see, it is barely below the MT. So we're really, really close here. You can see that groundwater levels have been hovering right at the MT, either slightly above or right at or slightly below since about 2020, but very stable. And then along the Tuolumne River, this is Schmid 227. The spring 2024 level is above the minimum threshold, and we're seeing this continuous rise in groundwater levels since fall 2022, which is nice to see. So what does this all mean? Well, the spring 2024 groundwater levels showed positive effects of another wet year. Groundwater levels have risen since the previous event, which was in the fall of 23. And as you've seen in many of the hydrographs, groundwater levels have risen in much of the subbasin since fall of 2022. These increases are less in the eastern subbasin. And as a reminder, the MT exceedances that we're seeing in the spring, the percentages that I showed you don't count towards the definition of undesirable results, but are just a good indication of what's going on. And there are no wells that had water levels below the IMs. So the next step is to take these two monitoring events from the fall 23 and spring 24, both of the events that happened in water year 2024. And these are going to be the basis for the next annual report, which we're going to begin within the next month or two. And that's due in April of 2025. So that's all I have. Any questions?
Questions for Liz from the member agencies?
I don't really have any questions regarding what you showed here. My question is, when are we supposed to take the next readings for 2020?
I'm
Believe it-
sorry. I couldn't hear that very clearly. It was a little muffled.
He was asking when we were going to take the next monitoring readings, and the answer to that is the first week of November. Anybody else? No? Questions or comments on the presentation for Liz or anyone else here from the public? No. Going once. Going twice. All right, you're off the hook, Liz.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks,
Good job, Liz.
everyone.
Thank you. All right. Next meeting, we will plan on being here at OID on the 13th of November at 1:30. We're hoping to go through possibly select a consultant and also make official approval of the committee for the water management or the well mitigation plan and the management actions work group, and then also the consultant. So we're hoping to hold that meeting. Keep it on your calendar. Questions, comments on that? Any comments from the public? The next meeting date? All right.
Can you remind me of the scope of that consultant? What exactly?
Yeah, and I'm gonna do that under committee comment
Okay.
reports.
Thanks.
Yeah, yep. Okay, so committee comments reports, what we did is we formed a water management plan, or well mitigation plan and management actions ad hoc, which consists of Christy from the county, Jesse from MID, and myself from OID. We have met and we actually reviewed the consultant RFP and RFQ that was out in the streets. It closed on the 30th of September. That period was extended about a week or two, I think, at the request of some of the consultants. We received two proposals.
Correct.
So the intent is to have that consultant lead the effort of formulating that well mitigation plan, and then also the management actions as well, developing those and leading that work group. So the consultant's going to lead the work group. The work group's going to be made up of public and potentially council members, board members. Nobody on this group or alternates are going to be on that work group. The interest period for that closed on the 30th of September as well. We got 27 applicants. The ad hoc group is going to meet tomorrow to look at those applications, and then also the proposals from the consultant. Some things to take away from our first meeting. We met before the original closing date and talked about a few things. So while the work group could be appointed by the chair of this group, we as the committee believe that it's best to have that come back to this group and have this GSA formally approve those appointments. It's not going to be, we're not required to follow the Brown Act, but we intend to follow the Brown Act and the intent of the Brown Act. So essentially what that means is we're planning to post at least high level general agenda before the meeting, ideally ahead of time in accordance with Brown Act requirements. We plan to take high level and general minutes and record attendance of the work group members that attend those meetings and what the recommendations are, those votes. The STRGBA GSA, so if you're one of the primaries or the alternates, you can attend, but you cannot provide any input outside of the committee that is going to be attending. So we're not preventing you from going, but you're going to have to sit in the room and be quiet, because ultimately your comments and input is going to come when the work group's recommendation comes back to this group. Makes sense. Okay. We agree that we really want to have representation from all areas. We don't know exactly what that breakdown looks like yet, because we haven't seen the final list, and we're going to go over that final list tomorrow. We're not planning on having the ad hoc committee members vote on that work group. Let's see. We did get some applications from attorneys, but there weren't attorneys from all cities and all agencies and all members. The committee feels like it's best not to have a whole group of attorneys at this work group, or just have some attorneys and not everybody's attorney. So we reached out to some of the attorneys that applied and let them know that if they wanted to have somebody representing apply and be part of the work group, then they still have an opportunity to do that. If and when, which likely is more of a when we get to the point of knowing what direction we want to take, when we want to form a policy, a formal policy, we're going to want to have the attorneys look at that for sure. So what the group did in the basin of the Northeast San Joaquin group, they formed an actual attorneys group. So once we had that direction, then we could provide that to the attorneys. So I'll get together and create that policy and make sure it was defensible. So that's kind of our plan, at least up to this point. Again, these attorneys and anybody who applies, who isn't ultimately appointed to the group, because we've got a lot of 27 applicants. We're not going to have a group of 27. And again, we want to make sure that we have representation across the board from all the cities, ideally the county, the irrigation districts, and then public, and hopefully not just board members and council members, but also the public. Not everybody's going to be appointed, but that doesn't mean that they can't attend the meeting. So while the primary and alternates can attend and they can't say anything, anybody from the public, anybody who applied, who isn't on the committee outside of those on this group, primary or alternate, can attend and provide input at every meeting. They just wouldn't get a chance to vote when it ultimately came to that time. Does that make sense? Okay. That's the rundown of what we kind of discussed so far, but we're going to get together again tomorrow and get into the weeds on the whole thing. Questions or comments on that aspect so far of that?
Hey, Eric, we have a couple of questions online.
Yeah, thank you. I see that. Appreciate that, Jennifer. So on that, I'll open it up to the public to provide some input on what they've heard so far about that committee meeting. Allie?
Hi, thanks. I was a little unclear. So are no attorneys going to be on the work group? And is it just because I'm an attorney?
That's the recommendation. We want to have either everybody have their attorney there or
Okay.
nobody have their attorney there, essentially on the, placing a vote. That doesn't mean you can't come to the meeting though.
Right.
Doesn't mean, yeah.
Yeah. So, is it just going to be landowners then?
No, we haven't decided that yet. I know we have some council members and supervisors and board members who have applied.
Okay. What about
so
other?
there's
Oh, go ahead.
potential. There's potential for them to be one of those members on the work group, but we haven't gotten to that point
Okay.
to make that final decision yet.
Are you thinking that like consultants will be allowed to participate on behalf of their?
We haven't really discussed that yet. That's something we'll look at tomorrow, but we're open to your feedback on all of that.
Yeah, I guess I would just offer that rather than I am an attorney, but I guess instead of thinking of me in that way, I am a representative for my clients, much the same as an engineer would be. So I don't think it's necessarily fair to discount my clients just because they're having an attorney represent them versus, an engineer or some other kind of consultant instead.
Fair. Okay. Thank you. Anything else? Thanks, Ellie. Henderson Hatfield, that's probably Stacy.
Hi, thanks so much. I echo what Ali has said. I think if you guys make a decision that representatives of landowners are not permitted to participate in the work group, I can respect that decision because it's across the board. But when you're talking about having potential supervisors and having other consultants participate in the work group and just excluding attorneys because they're attorneys, I do not think that that's reasonable or appropriate. I'm also a landowner. I own a building in downtown Modesto. So if I needed to have applied to represent my interest, my personal interest, as opposed to my clients, then I think that should have been made clear. I just think that it's, I'm fine with not being on the committee if I'm not selected to be on the committee, but I just don't think it's appropriate for you guys to say that people cannot participate simply because they have a law degree, but any other representative, regardless of their degree or lack thereof, is still capable of participating in the work group when they are there to represent a group of others. So I hope you would consider that and make a reasonable decision about who's included in the group. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so that's that committee and work group, our work group and consultant kind of update and that committee report. We do have a new MID alternate on the group. You want to go ahead and introduce Luke?
Sure, thanks, Eric. Before we do, I would like to just extend our appreciation for those that did apply for the work group. I think that was encouraging to see that there was 27 applicants that ranged. It ranged from landowners to attorneys to other representatives. So I do appreciate that, and probably speak on behalf of GSA members that was encouraging to see that level of involvement and interest. So thank you to all the applicants. And again, even for the comments that were made today, I think those are valid points that we will definitely take into consideration. But that helps provide that perspective going into review and selection, ultimate selection of the work group. It's good to get that kind of input. So thank you for that. And then going on, so MID did bring on a new senior civil engineer for our water resources group, which is Luke Crawford. He's here in attendance. So we just wanted to take some time to introduce him, and also just to let the board or let our GSA committee know that in instances where I'm not able to attend, Luke would attend on my behalf and represent MID as their representative for the GSA.
Very good. Welcome. Nice to meet you. I see Director Keating, MID Director Keating is on the line, and she's got her hand up. Did you want to comment on either the last few things we talked about? You're not muted, but we can't hear you for some reason. Fortunately, we can't hear you, Director. Technical difficulties there. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, there we go.
Oh, yay!
Right ahead. Yep.
I'm so sorry I couldn't make the meeting. I really wanted to be there. I have a few concerns that probably echo what the attorneys echoed for you in terms of your advisory committee. And I just wanted to share them today. What I'm concerned about when I heard that there were 2 MID board members who had applied to be on the committee, it first occurred to me that this was supposed to be more of an affected landowner consensus type group. And I'm a little bit worried about having too much influence from irrigation district board members and balancing that with you all work for the board members, right? So you're going to be influenced by what they're saying and what they're doing. So I would urge the committee to balance lawyers, irrigation district board members, council members in such a way so that you have knowledge from irrigation district board members, for instance, and council members who are involved in this, but also the common person. And that's the only comment that I wanted to make, is that I really am afraid that when you go into your negotiations with your ad hoc, I would really like you to keep in mind overdue, influences from your particular subsets of your bosses. and try to balance that. And that is all I have to say.
Understood. Thank you for that input. Okay, so the only other thing I wanted to mention was that the Eastern San Joaquin groundwater subbasin, basin to the north and the other side of the river, Stanislaus River, their draft GSP is out for public review right now. Their public review period closes on the 31st of October. That GSA board, or GWA board rather, they have JPA of all the GSAs. That GWA will meet on December 11th to recommend that the GSAs adopt the GSP. And then from there, the GSPs will individually take action, and that updated 2025 GSP for that subbasin will be due to DWR no later than the end of January. So if you're interested in reading up on that, now is your opportunity to read up on it and provide comments. That's all I have. Any other member agencies have anything they want to comment on or bring up?
Just on the operating budget, then when are we expected to get invoices for?
Good question. So there's two different invoices. So one's coming from
Yeah.
State of Modesto.
The name of those would be every December, 31st, I think, is what the contract agreement, sometime in late December.
And we've received, I think, the majority of the invoices from Todd for the GSP updates, so we would be preparing basically a cash call for invoicing out to different agencies here in the next month or so.
Well, this is for the 2025 budget, so it'd be due in after the first of the year, essentially, but close to that time period they'd be going out. It's kind of a short answer, right?
Correct.
Okay. Any other comments from member agencies? No? Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Right. Second.
Second.
Aaron, thank you. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Any adjourned. Thank you.